Hey, welcome back to Zero to X. I'm Ruby Nguyen, your host. And today, my guest is Ryan Galloway. Now, Ryan has a long CV of career accomplishments, but to make it short, he spent the last 13 years in finance and FinTech, from startup to corporate and now back to startup. And he's a special breed of entrepreneur, which I label as Intrapreneur. Now, he's not the founder of funding societies, but the definition of entrepreneur is that it's someone who acts and behave like a founder of a company. And behind all successful entrepreneurs, besides the husband and wife, is the entrepreneurs of the company. And today, I would love to talk to Ryan about two topics. Number one is that entrepreneurship that I was mentioning earlier, and number two is about FinTech market in Vietnam. There's a lot of development lately, and let's catch up on that. So Ryan, thank you so much for being here with me.
Thanks for having me.
So beside the introduction I told everyone earlier, would love to hear something personal about you. Okay. Besides the fact you have the greatest hairstyle.
I think maybe do two things. Probably the thing that I'm proudest of in my life is my son, Trevor. He is very much a part of the best parts of myself and the best parts of my wife, I think. And watching him grow and kind of bounce around, I think, is something which is both creates a lot of stress relief and stress in my life.
It was so great, a lot of stress for you.
Sure.
Okay.
Like, don't do that. I'm also quite active in terms of working out, even though my physique doesn't necessarily show it. I have a trainer that comes in about 3 times a week and tortures me at my house, and I pay for this, which is quite interesting. But
I understand. I do the same thing.
I used to be quite active in running, and then ended up with an Achilles injury in 2023, and then just got very into boxing. And for whatever reason, found the act of boxing and kind of getting jostled around. I would just finish that, and I would go into a training session with the trainer and get batted around a little bit. And whatever stress that I had in my life, anything that was going on before, just didn't seem that big anymore.
I see.
And when you're talking about working in technology companies or kind of what I do in advisory, it's a lot of stress, right? And it's a lot of personalities, and it's a lot of kind of what everyday work I think that we have to deal with. And it's good to cleanse that, kind of purge it, because it helps you get perspective and then maybe kind of unleash some blocks that you have.
So Ryan is a proud father. By the way, his wife is Vietnamese, and so his kid is half Vietnamese. Ryan is also half Vietnamese himself, but you can't see it on his face because he's American, but he has been here for 13 years, so he speaks some Vietnamese as well. But today we're going to speak in English. Yeah. So tell us a little bit, a quick story of how you landed here, and then you stick around for 13 years.
I first started coming to Vietnam when we co-founded a business with a B student cohort mate of mine named Hao Yip. She's she's probably people in the audience would know her as the co-founder of Tech Co-op, which is kind of what I think probably the hottest agribusiness startup in Vietnam right now, backed by AVV and TMB Aura. I met her as a part of our foundations program. We have to do a course brief on a country, and I got assigned Vietnam, and I knew absolutely nothing about Vietnam. And I'm going, God, so quick kind of MBA thinking, do I have anybody in my cohort that's from Vietnam?
Smart.
And there was Hao, and I basically said, Hao, can you tell me what I need to know to get through this assignment? Because I don't really want to do it, I'm lazy. And she did very graciously. Okay. And that started a friendship back in 2007 that lasted across 3 different ventures. Auxasia Holdings, MobiV Eye Care Benefits, then Na Foods Group, and now even I'm doing some advising. I'm a founding shareholder for Tech Co-op as well. And I think it was very kind of Steve Jobsian, the conversation. You know, that Steve Jobs, when he's talking to one of the VPs at Pepsi, like, do you want to sell sugary water for the rest of your life? Do you want to come with me and change the world?
I see.
the path that I was going, because I did JD MBA, and for a long time it was my dream that I wanted to be in Japanese you say hakujin eiyu, kind of the white hero, right? Where I was the guy that people would come to in the Japanese law firm when there was a problem that they needed a different perspective on. And that's what I thought I was going to do, kind of securities work and things like that. And I wanted my Japanese to be good enough that I could, kind of stand in for a Japanese person. And I never found that fit. And I think that it's not anything to do with Japanese culture or anything else, but it was just me, and that what I wanted was not at all what I wanted. I think there were two major conflicts. Number one, I never really felt like I was a part of a team there. It was kind of the last rung that they would have to go through and things like that. I think the other thing was kind of management by consensus. And there's a place for it in especially throughout this world, especially when you're taking a long-term investment horizon. But making decisions kind of based off of a relationship versus off of like transactional logic, it's something that it didn't sit well with me. And sitting with Hao on a Skype call talking about the business that we founded, Oxasia Holdings, which was kind of garage band boutique investment advisory for Vietnamese companies wanting to raise money.
Oh, okay.
Of which Na Foods Group and MobiV Iker Benefits were 2 out of the 3 of our first customers. That's how we met them. And so I was just finishing up my coursework at Temple Law, and she's like, so after you graduate, what are you going to do? He's like, and she kind of basically, she said in a nice way, like, have you had enough yet? and I was like, what do you mean? She's like, you've been to Vietnam. You've got to be kind of the person in the room who gets to make decisions, who gets to make the call. Versus, you can be a contributor and a good contributor, but you're never going to be the person who makes the call. And
you want to make the call.
Yeah, and that stuck me like my PT hits me sometimes with a right cross right in the chin. I go, ugh. And she was right. Like at that time. And I probably could have been the person who made the call in Japan or even in the United States. But the reality is, and I shared this with David in the last podcast that I did, I was a director of a publicly traded company in Vietnam at age 29. Now, you can do that in the US. You can do that in Japan. If you're the founder or you come from any number of schools, which some of my friends have gone to, but that I unfortunately did not. But in Vietnam, circa like 21, 2022, like I could get that gig. And it was something where Asia to me represented, and specifically Vietnam represented an opportunity to kind of catapult the experience, kind of even jumping past mid-level management directly into executive.
Why do you think that is the case?
Vietnamese pragmatism. We do not care if you are white, black, yellow, pink, or whatever else. We care if you can make money and you can get stuff done. If you can do that, you're more than welcome. If you can't, see you later. And I've worked in Japan, I've worked in Korea, I've worked in each of the countries in Southeast Asia. There's not a country like that. There's really not a country like that.
Interesting. I've noticed the difference between different Asian cultures, but now that you pointed out that pragmatism, yes, yes, that's the right word. Yep, and I love that.
They're one of Vietnam's trailers, been here for 13 years. But the reality is that the entrepreneurs here came up with less. So they've had to be more intuitive. They've had to be more imaginative, resourceful. Because capital markets here don't work like they do in Indonesia or Singapore or even Thailand. Where there's a pocket of money, you just have to find it. Here, the pockets of money are different. It's not, you have to kind of either go over shore, and I think it's really only just been over the past 5 to 7 years where local pockets have started to grow up. And if you come from that type of background, that means you're going to be a different type of entrepreneur. And I think that's reflective, kind of that pragmatism is reflected in entrepreneurship here as well.
You mentioned about it. I love entrepreneurship, on the entrepreneurial spirit in this country. And it's everywhere, right? I learned to be an entrepreneur, make a guess when?
When you were a kid?
We've known each other for a long time.
When you were a kid?
Yes.
Okay.
From my grandmother, when I was like 7, right? Because she has a small, what you call a mom and pop shop, right? Or mom and pop shop. And that's where I learned entrepreneurship. I didn't even know that back then, right? But now that I reflected back on my journey, it's like, that's how I started.
I was 6 years old,
Yeah.
and it was quite cute. I tried selling rocks.
Okay.
I picked up very beautiful rocks from around the lake, and I put them in the back of my father's truck.
Okay, I can see some people buying it.
And I sold some. I sold some. I think people probably took pity on me because some of the rocks are quite big.
No, beautiful rocks are beautiful. Like, I would buy it. So let's talk a little bit about your love for the pragmatism, right? And then the love for entrepreneurship in this country. So you were trained as a lawyer, and then you went to MBA, and then you found that Vietnam is like a new kind of water that you can be a fish in, right? And so how did you get into finance and fintech?
So we got into finance and fintech when we were at Oxasia Holdings. We took on a mandate from Nguyen, which is one of those very famous Viet Qs who I think he was top of the US tech bubble in '97. He was a boat person that came over from, I think he left Vietnam late '80s and then landed in the US, went to Boston College, graduated. He graduated, but he was a PhD, which is called ABD, which is all but dissertation. And the reason why he didn't do his dissertation is because he founded a company called On Display, which went IPO in 1997, is the second highest subscribed company behind a little known company, maybe you know it, called Apple Computer.
Wow.
He's a big boy. And about that time, Hao and I had done the boutique investment bank thing at Oxasia Holdings. We placed like $70 million worth of capital in 7 months, which today doesn't seem like that much, but back then we were on fire. And we're like, look, okay, we're good at this. We know how to do it, kind of take a company, clean it up, and show how to be able to present it to investors. But we haven't built anything. We haven't actually created. We've made stories, that's an important part of the journey, but there was no operational grit yet. And so I think that at that same time, Hao had met with Antrom, and Antrom had invited Hao to come and work. And then Antrom said, hey, do you have anybody else that you can help to bring in? Because he was thinking about pivoting the business from them, which was Vietnam's first e-wallet, into something else. But he hadn't figured out what that something else was, which was eventually credit. And then he met with me, and then as Antrom often does, is he wowed me and got me to basically work for him for almost for free.
I see.
But I got ESOP, which was okay. And I joined them as their director of strategy, which really was, I think was kind of an ambiguous title, which has followed me around. I really don't know what it means.
Yes, I know, right? I always ask, like, what is a director of strategy? Responsibility?
What I actually did was kind of like key account management for enterprise acquisition to raise money. Those were the two things that I was doing.
Okay.
And then helping with the board. And when we were there, we raised about $250 million, $300 across equity and debt, both onshore and offshore, both off-balance sheet and on-balance sheet. And at iCare, it was kind of the darling of impact investors from about 2014 to 2017. The business model was really, really simple. We knew that factory workers didn't have access to credit. And we knew that banks weren't going to lend to them because lots of banks have tried to be able to do it. And the other thing that banks and consumer finance companies didn't figure out is that people don't like it when you lend to them at 60% APR. Go figure, right? Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And so what we did, which is we moved from kind of two different things. We moved from the balance-centric model, which means I give you $100. The way I make money is I charge you the 60% interest, so I'm making $5, $7 per month off of you. Versus you split, which is kind of a bit, which is spend-centric, more like American Express, where I charge the merchant and I charge you a little bit, but the amount that I charge you is less than guys like Capital One and things like that. My big contribution to the model is they said, well, nobody knows how to be able to collect. And I said, why don't you just do it from their salaries? And then Trump's like, could you do that? And I'm like, salary withholding? We did it literally it was where that idea of being able to do salary deduction, which kind of GMO and all of those guys use today.
Yeah, nowadays there are a bunch of startups doing that, right? Yeah.
You know where it came from? My mom's factory.
Okay.
My mom was a baker. She would work 8 to 10 hours a day making cakes and confectionery at Swiss Colony. And then she'd go and work another 6 to 8 hour shift as managing a restaurant. And the way that she got our first computer, which was a Gateway 2000, came in a big cow box. For any Americans watching, I'm dating myself because that was only sold for a certain time period. The way that she paid for it is that she put a down payment on it, and then the company fronted the money and paid for the rest and gave it to us, and then they did the rest through wage assignment, where he said, like, look, we'll take out $20 per month until you pay this off. And the factory was happy because they did something for the worker. The worker was happy because they had the opportunity to be able to give something to their kid. That's how it got started. That was the inspiration. It was something that, and it shows to me that in entrepreneurship, if you're open, you probably have had the experience that you need to be able to create something very dynamic.
Right, it's actually come from your life experience.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's just a matter of how do I fit these pieces together that are my experience into something that is impactful to people.
So you've spent like 13 years in finance and financial technology roles and companies. What do you see is the evolution of this industry in the last 13 years?
When I think about Vietnam in terms of technology adoption in general, I think that you see, and it's not something which is unique to Vietnam, but I think Vietnam provides a good case study for it, is that Vietnam leapfrogs things, where in the United States, we went from, for the internet, we went dial-up modem to Wi-Fi to now kind of 5G ubiquitous. Vietnam's kind of like, let me just start off at 4G, 5G, because it makes a lot more sense. Or things like being able to go into a cafe and get Wi-Fi for free. Like if you try to do that in the US, you've been there multiple times. Like it's such a foreign concept, right? If we talk about FinTech specifically, one of the things that I see, which I think will be quite dynamic that we have in the US versus, quite dynamic that we have in Vietnam that we don't have in the US is QR. I mean, think about 12 months ago. Who used QR in Vietnam? Some people. Who uses it today? Everyone. It's something that, it's government sponsored. It was something that it's been seen in other countries, very popular in China. But that'll never happen in the US. And there are lots of reasons why that will never happen in the US. It has to do a lot with kind of big banks and credit card companies lobbying because their little POS is a way that they make money and protect their own interest. But when you think about FinTech and think about kind of instantaneous cash transmission or instantaneous settlement, I think Asia can actually lead other markets because those other markets don't have large vested interests here. Or they do, but those vested interests just don't have the same lobbying power that they have in the United States or in the EU.
Well, they don't have that legacy, right? They don't have that legacy.
Legacy is another component of it, correct?
Yeah. So you've seen a lot of leapfrogs. What is the greatest leapfrogs besides the QR codes that you've seen in the FinTech market in Vietnam?
eKYC. I think eKYC is something that hasn't really taken off with banks in the United States yet. I think that they're starting to do it, but there are other things that we don't necessarily have yet in Vietnam, where I think that there are critical parts of infrastructure like automated clearinghouses. So in the United States, if you're at Bank A and I am Bank B, I can send a command to your bank and say, deduct this money from her, she owes it to me.
Okay.
And you can do that automatically. You have to authorize it, like you have to click something at some point to authorize it, but that happens. We don't really have that yet here. You still have to do through QR, like I can send you a QR, I can send it back, but there's no kind of automation where I can say, do this every single month, kind of the automated payments. So we have some things to work on there.
I would love to do that automated payment every month because I hate paying bills.
Sure. Most people do.
And when I was living in Singapore a while ago, and that was just like done 13 years ago, just for my bank account. So comparing Vietnam to perhaps a leading financial technology market like China, what do you see is the key difference?
Time.
Time?
What
does it mean?
To me, I think that I think time and resources, because China, I think, has spent a lot of money in terms of being able to develop infrastructure because they understand it's something that's within its interest, right? And if we take a look at technology adoption as a whole, kind of the US always takes the longest amount of time because it has the longest amount of time, right? That's where kind of innovation starts. China's about half that amount of time because they will take, you're kind of standing on the shoulders of giants, right? Like I take what I learned from the other markets, I apply it here, and I figure out how my people are different, what they're willing to accept and how fast they're willing to accept it. Like nobody in China uses a check, right? Like this is not a concept that really took off, right? And the same thing here.
Yeah.
Vietnam's even faster than China. And the reason why Vietnam is faster than China is because there are fewer people, right? It takes less time for you to meet critical mass here where everyone starts using it. Even if you take a look at the time where everyone started to use Momo versus how quickly everyone started to use QR. Part of that is because Momo kind of pushed the way and now people are comfortable in using financial technology. But the rate of speed that people adopted QR, you're talking about like, I mean, Momo was around since the same time as Mobi. I used to compete against those guys on Yip, and they were around since 2010. And it took them 12 years to get to the point where they were kind of ubiquitous. It took QR like what, 18 months? Like that's phenomenal when you think about it. And it's, as long as you provide kind of the regulatory framework and the rails to work, Vietnam can be, I think, kind of a financial powerhouse in Southeast Asia. It really could. There are lots of things that I think that have to happen to be able to get there, but again, based off of two things. Number one, I think the power of the entrepreneurs that we have here, if we unleash them in Southeast Asia, they will take it over for sure.
If we unleash them, what is putting them on leash?
No, unleash them.
Yes, I know. If we unleash them, right? But what is putting them on a leash right now?
Current policy, right? Like it's very hard for a Vietnamese company to buy a company in Thailand.
Yeah.
You have to apply for certain licenses.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about what you see in the future of FinTech in Vietnam.
I would like to think that Vietnam is quite interesting because it balances both the progression of its financial infrastructure right along the same side of crypto. Vietnam, for whatever reason, I'm not sure if it's because we like to we like to be speculators here, or if it's just because we like to be able to make money quickly, like lots of other countries, and people are willing to take risk here. But the reality is that the crypto rails here are quite good, and so I see the opportunity for, as the technology continues to progress, the ability to be able to become more of a financial hub in specific sectors can be quite attractive. If we think about kind of two different things happening at the same time. One, Vietnam, for the next 7 to 10 years, will be a manufacturing powerhouse. It's just going to happen. More people decide to come and eat every day, and as long as kind of the labor arbitrage still makes sense, people will put factories here, workers will come to work. And at the same time, when you have more trade flow, that means that people will need money faster. Anytime that there is demand, technology will come in and say, can I do these things faster? So if I think about kind of in my business, trade finance, when you're thinking about being able to do that right now, the reality is that a lot of domestic and even foreign banks operating in Vietnam won't do unsecured trade credit. As we continue to do the advent of crypto, you might not need it. You might be able to have people in the US willing to finance this order of passion fruit concentrate, if I go back to my non-foods group days. That like agribusiness, that have $67,000, $80,000 of extra cash, and they do this, the money lands in that company's account, they go off, they do their production, when the money comes back in, it shoots back out.
That's a great story. Great imagination. How likely is that going to happen?
I think you're already starting to see components of it coming together. IFC's done supply chain finance using bank rails already. You see these projects happening. Whether or not we want it to happen really depends, I think, on a factor of three things. I think market demand is there already. I think that the organizations, both on kind of buy side, sell side, want to see it happen. The last component that you have, I really think, is government. And the thing that has been surprising to me since I've been here is that at least in that sector, in the sector that I work with, I think that we have one of the best regulators out of all of, not to say that any of the regulators in Vietnam are bad, but at least State Bank of Vietnam, to me, has one of the most open minds because they actively will request people like funding societies or other organizations like Momo they will send out their draft decrees and say, what do you think about this? And they'll seek
so they
comment.
take feedback?
Exactly, which I think is something which is very progressive. And I see them wanting, with the advent of FinTech, Sandbox and things like that, I see progress happening. Of course, I'd like to see it happen faster, of course, because I'm 42 and not getting any younger, but I see it heading in that direction. It's just a matter of if the thought leaders in those organizations continue to stay empowered, continue to stay relevant, then I think there's a good chance.
So where do you see there's a big opportunity for FinTech in Vietnam, but no one is capitalizing on it aggressively yet?
I think infrastructure in underwriting trade data is one that I start to see both at the consumer level and in the at the enterprise level or SME level. What I'm talking about specifically is when you're in the United States, everything gets kind of reported into the credit bureau. Whether it's when you take a secured loan out from a bank or car, credit cards, all those things, but your utility payments that you make with other people, basically every payment that you make, all of that gets fed into the system. When we talk about CIC, we start to have the first layer of that, which is any of your bank activity or any of your bank credit or your secured credit is there. But
what is CIC, by the way?
Credit Information Center.
Okay.
When you go to the bank and you apply for a loan, they'll run you through CIC. The information that they have is part of the picture, which is kind of what's your credit card doing, what bank accounts do you have open.
Oh, that's how they have all the credit scores so fast, right?
Exactly. Yeah. But the challenging part is that you're missing the other side of the story, which is how to make payments that aren't tied to a credit facility, where other countries have that. Now when we start to do things like QR and you start to do lots of these transactions, you start to do automated payments that aren't on an ACH, automated credit clearinghouse, you can start aggregating data. And the more data you aggregate, it means you can start to develop a fuller profile, either for an individual or for an enterprise, to be able to have somebody like me come in and do lending. To say that at the end of the day, you can say, when I take a look at both sides of this transaction, I see that you're always making your credit payments on time and you always make your other payments on time. Plus, I don't see anything like OnlyFans or whatever else in your credit history, so you're a good person to do business with.
Chào những khán giả của Zero to X. Mình muốn dành một chút thời gian để cảm ơn Workflow, nhà tài trợ của tập podcast ngày hôm nay. Đội ngũ của mình tại Curious cũng đang sử dụng không gian tại Workflow để làm việc hybrid. Cả đội rất yêu thích kiến trúc hiện đại, đồ ăn ngon và những ly cà phê đầy tính sáng tạo ở đây. Điều tuyệt vời nhất là bạn có thể đăng ký sử dụng không gian linh hoạt với chi phí rất là kinh tế. Nếu bạn đang tìm kiếm một không gian làm việc hybrid cho bản thân hoặc cho đội ngũ nhỏ của mình tại thành phố Hồ Chí Minh thì hãy thử Workflow nhé.
You have been a relentless fighter in almost every tough times that you've faced. Have you ever thought about starting your own company?
Sure.
Yeah.
Of course. I mean, we did it Oxasia Holdings, right? So that was my first company that I ever started. But since then, yeah, I have. I think that just because of certain commitments that I had, like financially to the family and things like that, I hadn't had the opportunity where I wanted to make sure that others had the chance first.
Yeah. The reason why I asked is because I've observed you for a while, and the story you've told, you really behave like you're the founder of those companies that you've been at. And that's why I call you an intrapreneur, and you disagree with me, and feel free to disagree. But it seems like you have the bulk of an entrepreneur. Yeah. So I now understand that you have some other family responsibilities. I mean, being an entrepreneur, you have to take the extra risk, right? So let's talk about entrepreneurship, right?
Sure.
Yeah. What do you think is the key difference and the similarities and the key difference between the entrepreneur who found the company and the entrepreneur like you, who I can behave like one?
It is very interesting because as we were talking before we started rolling the cameras, like I've never had that label applied to me before.
Yeah, now you have it.
Now I have it, and I have to think about it. Because when I thought about entrepreneur, I always thought about kind of the corporate venture guy who does the Skunk Works project, something new.
Maybe,
but like I can see that it's applicable in this, and I think that the biggest thing that's different is you have to know when to let go. When you deal in an organization which is regional, where there are 4 other babies, and to be honest, some of those other babies are more important than we are, right? Yeah. To have that decision made, and I think it's not necessarily, it's not hard, and maybe I take that last statement back. It's not hard to know when to let go, because I feel like at the end of the day, that's one thing that I've gotten quite good at over the past 18 months is where I'm just here to present options and then say option A, option B, option C. But doing that and kind of knowing when to be hands off.
And you have to hands off from that ABC.
That's the okay part. The tough part is, when do I push?
You let go and then you push. Wow, that's like
because you
a
have
battle inside your own head.
Like you have to know when to be hands off.
Yeah.
And when you have to fight.
Yeah.
And that to me, and we're not talking about like, kind of like, it's always kind of very cordial in a lot of the companies that I work with, but what happens when your conviction goes against something? Are you wrong? Are they wrong? Is anything wrong? Like these are the types of things that I think that when you work in a regional organization, or even in other companies where somebody like me who joins a team later on has an idea that goes counter to what the founder wants. Or not even what they want, maybe it's exactly what they want, but just kind of the operational decisioning is different because I prioritize, this is my experience, this is my baggage, this is how I process. They have different. Knowing when to kind of push and say, I appreciate your point on this, but fuck off, I'm right, and let me do it, like just let me show you. Versus it's time to learn and it's time to, okay, let this one go and just kind of disagree.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Like just kind of disagree and execute.
Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about. I've made that mistake of not letting go. And then it created some problem with the internal team. Yeah. So talking about that, what is your biggest mistake that you've made in your career? Or maybe the biggest failure?
Fighting over valuation for vanity.
Tell me more.
I think that actually, if I'm honest about it, that was what kind of started the downfall of IQ Benefits, where 120 wasn't enough, but 150 was.
I see.
And we had other money that was ready to go and would have came in. And I remember, like it was yesterday, I got a term sheet at 150. I was trying to push it to 165. And I was on the way back home, taking Trang, my wife, to meet my family for the first time. We were at Hong Kong. And I got a phone call. It was on WhatsApp, and it was a conference call. And I won't say the fund manager's name, but he said, I knew something was happening because they had given us the term sheet. We had signed, but they hadn't signed on their, they hadn't started engaging, I think it was E&Y as their accountant, as a part of the financial due diligence process. They said, Ryan, we're really, really sorry to inform you, the transaction's been vetoed. And I went, you gave me a term sheet, right?
Yeah.
You signed that term sheet. How does this get vetoed? And they said, well, we have on our investment committee, we have an individual who doesn't align with our vision on the company. He, like I said, I've had a couple dealings with him, where he was just somebody who was on that investment committee who threw a wrench in it, and then came to find out later the reason why he did it likely was because he had a countervailing bid that was on a down round. And so they were saying, hey, why are you going to take this at 150 when I can get it over here at 40?
Whoa. So what would you have done different in that situation if you could have done it again?
Take the investor that I'm most comfortable with is going to let us, the team, not because remember that I did this inside of a company where I was put on the masthead. I was adopted as a co-founder, and that's happened in a lot of the companies that I've worked in. But it wasn't my company. It was Entrepreneurship.
Did you have a lot of stake?
I was the largest individual shareholder besides the founder at exit.
I see.
And a part of that's because I took my own money and plowed it back in, and so like I had a right to be there, and he adopted both Hao and I as his co-founder, but it wasn't my company. And I think that to date was probably my greatest, because I like, when it came down to it, and this will be the first time, like, actually
it's it's worth 120 million.
Exactly. But I think the money part wasn't as important to me. Look, maybe this is transmitted daddy issues or something like that, but like, my dad was a good man, but he was also a raging alcoholic growing up. And so I didn't really have that positive male, calm role model growing up. I think I kind of adopted, unbeknownst to him, and if he sees this, it'll be quite cute. Actually, I just talked to him a couple weeks ago. I think I adopted him almost as my work father, and I knew that I disappointed him. And that was the biggest thing. And all of the people at Eye Care Benefits, I had brought friends into that company. I had opened up subsidiaries across 6 different countries, and that started a waterfall where I had to bury the bodies.
Oh my God.
Where a lot of those people that I brought in with promises of being able to send their kids to whatever college or buy this house or just, you know, do the right thing and help hardworking people be able to get the things that they want in their life.
What happened here at the end of the
Bought out by HD
company?
Bank. Bought out by HD Bank.
Okay.
Bought out by HD Bank. But yeah, and I take that personally. Like Michael Jordan said, and I took that personally. And that's, I'd like to say that I've learned 100% from it. But those character defects do come back sometimes, where it's more about the struggle of the negotiation versus, is this the right thing? Having to take a step back and say, like, is this the right thing? And I think that as I advise companies right now, and the model that I have for capital markets is that I always try to do everything that I can to become with the team, because that's what I know, that's what I understand, like kind of the traditional investment banking, make a pitch deck and there's kind of a separation. I don't get that, I don't do that, and I don't, as you know, because you and I work together.
You attach your heart and your mind to the company you advise,
The muscle that I'm working hard to develop still this day is almost to be able to flip back to go into lawyer mode and say, hey, I know you and I have been on this journey together, but these are the options.
Having that strong attachment gives you that strength and that drive, right? But at the same time, detachment gives you the calmness. But can you do that? Can you separate yourself?
Yes. It depends. In advising a company, which is maybe similar to Curious, it's very easy for me because substantively I understand the message, I believe in the vision, but it's not mine. That's different, right? Because I help to architect that a bit. The answer is you can do it in both, but it's easier to do if it's something that hasn't been kind of created by your own hand. But I would argue that entrepreneurs have to do that too, right? That if you bring in an investor, and if it's not working anymore, you gotta let it go. And that's something that I don't think that there is, except for the people that are born with it intuitively, and there are those people that are blessed like that. I think that's something that, just like maybe becoming a better parent after the first or second kid, after the first or second company, you learn how to be able to be kind of like this. I think the best example that I can see for that, again, and I cite her a lot, is How. Where even when I hear her talk about tech co-op nowadays, she'll say like, look, I'm very comfortable after B, like I can just be a professional CEO because I've done it already in my career.
Wow.
I understand what that is. And if I'm not the right person to lead it, like I get it. And she's already made that clear with the investors that she deals with up front to know if they feel like they ever need to pull the trigger, they can. But if you think about it, it's also quite empowering because now they know that can't be used as a tactic either. So it's quite freeing in that sense.
That's tough. Yeah. When I work for other companies as well, like not even my own company, like Elsa, for example. When I work for Elsa, I'm Elsa. Like that's my identity. Yeah. Which give me the strength, but also, it can give you some imbalance in terms of mental health. Yeah.
But I think that's the thing that we learn as we continue to go on this journey is that we are not our work.
Yeah.
And that's, as a young entrepreneur, that's a hard, but I think that
I think everyone is built different. Brian, one of our friends, right?
Sure.
Mutual friends, he's built, I don't know, 1,000 companies, right? And still to this day, right, it's very hard for him to detach from his company. I mean, he's learned some muscles, but I talked to him and he's even mentioned about it on the podcast, that it's very hard for him to detach from the company. It's just everyone has different kind of personality, temperament. We are wired differently, and if it is who we are, then we just have to notice it and then try to not let it become our own pitfall. Yeah. But you know what? I love treating my work as a part of me. I just find there's so much more depth in satisfaction, and I find a lot of creativity in it as well. Yeah. But like you said, we have to balance it out with good friends and family circles, good workout, and trying to take care of other parts of our life. Yeah.
I think I agree with the statement that you're making, but I think that it's giving myself permission to fail and have that be okay, and not kind of about right.
Yeah.
But taking a look at it and being like, okay, why did this happen? What happened? Where did I fuck up? where did, and then having the presence of mind to kind of be able to go back through, do the autopsy, and figure out what happened. Where the stuff that happened with Untapped, that tore me apart for about 2 weeks.
Only 2 weeks?
Well, it was basically the 2 weeks that I went back home and poor trying because I'm introducing her to my family for the first time and having to manage.
Not great timing.
Yeah, and then having to manage this across a 12-hour time difference, and it was quite painful. I think that and one of the questions that I think that was put up was kind of work-life balance. I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
I think the idea that you talked about in terms of wanting to be able to, I want to work with companies where either the substantive matter, the sector is interesting, or I like the people that I work with. If I can have both, that's great.
Yeah.
But if I can't have either of them, what the hell am I doing here? It doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So that when I do it, when things go wrong, and they will go wrong inevitably, and the reason why they will go wrong is that I'm not the guy that people call when things are going well. In my career, since I care, I'm the guy that people call when...
Why do you think so?
No, because it's just been that's the way that it's been, because people had heard about eye care benefits. They knew kind of the insurrection that happened there against Untapped, and then they started to say, okay, who do you call when you're in trouble? You call Ryan. And that's...
So you built that...
completely unintentionally.
Yeah. But somehow it happened.
Yeah. There were a lot of, I think, Vietnam's most notable blow-ups. I probably knew about it, I would say, a year in advance. One specifically, I remember I was called in by the shareholder group to talk to the Vietnamese founder. And when I left that conversation at Starbucks, I felt like he and I had reached an accord. He was going to kind of do what I thought was the right thing. 12 months later, he was in court in Singapore. I don't know if it's a lawyer in me. I don't know if it's just because I've been down that path. But normally, I for whatever reason, I'm not the guy that people call when things are going well.
Oh, I hope people call you when things happen. When people have trouble, they call you. That means they trust you.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
There's some level of trust and your ability to be able to help them out of bad situations, which is not a bad thing. It's not a pleasant thing. But yeah, I hope that they will call you when things go well too. Maybe you should teach them that. Right? We only teach them to call you when things are bad.
It's even strange to me where, and I don't know if this is just founder empathy or whatever else, but I randomly had kind of a very well-known Vietnamese brand. He came and approached me. He came to FS just kind of looking for finance. Then come to find out, after 2 conversations, that this guy was in a serious fight for his life at his company. I don't know why that happens, like, and it always happens. Like, people will always end up opening up. And it's, in one part, it's a very, I'm honored to that people would have that kind of level of trust that quick, right? Because they don't necessarily even have that type of level of trust with some of the shareholders that they have in their company. But the emotional toll that takes.
Right.
Because you have somebody who's reached out for help. And sometimes you have to say, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I can give you, again, here's ABC. This is what I think. I don't know if I can help you. And that's, I hate giving good people bad news. I don't know if that makes me a people pleaser or not, but like, I just, for an entrepreneur that I feel like is doing the right thing, and either they're getting bullied or maybe they're just misunderstood. And normally, I would say 9 times out of 10 in my experience in Vietnam and beyond, there's just misunderstanding which has been magnified by some breach of trust that happened, whether it was intentional or unintentional. And sometimes a guy like me coming in and saying, like, hey, look, this is kind of what I see. What do you see? And sometimes it gets fixed. But in other situations, it's too far gone. And then you have to start to think about, okay, do I have the emotional well to help this person fight? Recently, the answer to that question has been no, because I've been dealing with kind of my own stuff.
Yeah.
But I'll always listen. And I always will give people, they talk about it, and kind of being a lawyer, you get the first 30 minutes free. kind of listen, even.
Is it because you're trained as a lawyer, and right away they have that sense of, oh, this is someone who can help me, and then also you're in finance, right? Which somehow attract people to bring that kind of problem up.
Sure.
Yeah. Is it you that attract them, or is it the maybe I'm not sure to ask this question. Like, let me rephrase that. Let me erase that. Do you think it's actually a career strength that you have, that people actually open up to you with that kind of problems?
I'm not sure.
Maybe you could be a consultant.
Yeah, consulting business doesn't scale. I'm not,
Okay.
I'm grateful for it. I think that's probably the first place to start off. And because I've learned something from every single entrepreneur that I've dealt with. I hope that I've left an imprint on them. Like, when we had our time working together, I hope that I've left an imprint on you. And I can tell you for certain that you've left an imprint on me. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why I do it, is that in each one of the fights that I take up, I see little of something that I've experienced in the past. I don't like it, and I want to exercise that demon of the past by helping the demon of the present. that as it's being
that's a good way to put it.
as it's being as it presents in its modern form. Let's put it like that. Can you make a career out of it? Maybe this is what activist investors do in the U.S. I'm not sure. I just am compelled a lot by the problem. And the problem can be a market problem. The problem can be a shareholder problem. The problem can be a co-founder problem. Because I feel like a lot of it comes back to the question that I got asked a lot when I was in Vietnam, when they were like, wait a minute, you're a lawyer. Yeah. But you're a business person. Yeah. Huh. And the way that I said it was like, look, I translate. Whether it's kind of Japanese into English, or English into Vietnamese, or law into business, or business into law.
Well, there's a lot of good business people who were a lawyer, yeah, or still are a lawyer.
I think that's probably where it's at.
Yeah.
But I like what I do. I love that what's the name of the movie? In The Big Short, where there's this character which is played by, oh gosh, what's his name? The guy that was also plays the lead character in the 40-Year-Old Virgin.
No, that's not.
He plays a fund manager from Morgan Stanley, and he's one of the guys that he's been the contrarian investor who who finally, in the movie, he finally has the chance to stick it to all the big banks that he hates. But he realizes that by doing it, he's taking advantage of the American public. And it's a brilliant character. If you haven't seen The Big Short, it's a great movie.
I've seen the movie. I can't recall the narrative.
The guy that I'm talking about specifically is he's on a phone call with his wife, and his wife's saying like, "You hate your job," and he's like, "I love my job." And she goes, "You hate your job," and he's like, "I love my job. I love my job." And then you see him scream at somebody on the screen.
Is that you and your wife?
But like that's,
yeah.
And I feel like there's that relationship because like. It's addictive, it really is, but it exacts a toll. It does.
I see. Yeah. So that's how you feel. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for your sharing today on your take on fintech in Vietnam and your personal journey navigating this market, the ups and downs and the big mistakes of $125 million. Before we end this conversation, usually I have a few quick fun questions for my guests. I call it the lightning round.
Okay.
So here we go. Treat it like a TikTok. It's quick and fun.
Okay.
Yeah. So what do you think is the most important skill of an intrapreneur?
Ability to be able to listen and understand both what you're being told and what the real message is. Understand what the motivation is.
And similarities between being a father and an executive or boss. Besides listening.
knowing when to let the kid fight and when to pull him back. Same thing with worker. Same thing with management. Being able to stomach letting people fail. With Trevor, it's a little bit different, but it's kind of the same concept. Like you know what the inevitable outcome is going to be, but you got to let them do it, right? And kind of shared emotional response, right? Like I had somebody at FS where I just nominated her for kind of a regional recognition, and she wrote me a message saying like, "Thank you very much for your comments. Like I want to be the best now." And I was like, and I felt the pride and the happiness that she felt when she shared it with me. It's the same thing when I watched Trevor kind of look around, and I asked him what he wanted to be. And he said, I want to be a rock star, I want to be a soccer player, I want to be a scientist, and I want to be a businessman like Daddy. And I said, well, Mommy does business too, right? But the fact that I looked at him and saw that sense of pride in him for what he thinks that I do, and when he comes to see me at the FS office, and everyone comes and says hi to Daddy, and Daddy has to sign lots of papers and things like that. Like, it's
a lot of pride. Yeah. So, you talk about this before. You love your job, but you also you hate it and you love it, right?
Sure.
So that conversation. What do you love the most?
Results.
Results?
Results.
And don't tell me what you hate the most is when you don't
surprises.
get results.
Surprises.
Okay. Hey, what's the dark side of entrepreneurship?
Loneliness.
Loneliness. How was my guest in the previous episode, and she said the same thing.
Loneliness.
Did you feel lonely?
Sure. When you're at companies, by virtue of anyone that signs up for working in a technology company, you're going to be staring at the abyss. And what I mean by the abyss is that you're going to have to make decisions because cash is running out or whatever. Like it happens to all of us. We do as much as we try to mitigate that risk. And even the most conservative entrepreneurs that I know, they've all faced it. But looking down into the abyss, like, okay, so this is basically extinction of this company, right? Knowing all of the people that have put their trust in you, and knowing that all of that could be destroyed by the next decision that you make, and you have to make it within the day. That can get quite lonely because there aren't a lot of people that.
No one else is in the same shoes.
Yeah. Even though honestly, there are a lot of people that are in those same shoes, but we don't talk about it.
Yeah. Not the exact shoes though, like similar shoes, yeah.
And the reason why we don't talk about it, like in the US, there are lots of them, right? But here, when we think about what I just did in terms of dropping that name, like.
Actually, I respected you for telling the story with so much transparency.
Sure. But it's one of those things where like, it's such a small community here. We can't talk about one another. We can't talk about these things unless we have absolute confidence in the people that we're talking with, because it's a really small community, right? What goes around comes around, and if you're loose-lipped on certain things like this, there are going to be some people that will take it to their grave, and there are going to be some people that are going to use it against you, and it's hard to know at any given point.
Unless you're a lawyer.
Yeah, like
who can fight for yourself. Yeah, the dark side of entrepreneurship is a lot of loneliness. And how about the dark side of finance or FinTech?
I think the dark side of maybe finance is having to take things from good people when they can't pay. That's one thing that I've learned a lot over the past 12 months, where when we talk about kind of the basics of credit, ability to pay and willingness to pay. And for people that have the ability to pay but don't want to, like, I got a solution for you. But for the people that want to pay but can't, just because BAU, something happened, crackdown in the cashew industry that actually happened to us. Bank pulling their loan because the bank had to support a larger enterprise, they needed the credit room. And they've given you, not necessarily, I've been very fortunate I hadn't had to take anybody's house. Maybe their second investment property, but something that they put kind of blood, kind of
their life work,
everything into, and I've got to take it and sell it to get back. That's tough. I think the other part which is tough is to be dispassionate when you know somebody is trying to pull one over on you from just like bringing down the fire. Like being an organization which is very well resourced and being like, look, I'm not going to do this, even though you've done wrong, and I know you've done wrong, and you won't admit that you've done wrong, but like the evidence very clearly shows that you have. That's one skill that I think which has come up, which is I'm going to take this other commercial avenue, even though going the legal route would be way more satisfying, because this was better for the company, because it gets cash back faster.
Okay, let's end with the real fun question. What is your dream?
What is my dream? I want to spend every day that I can with Trevor.
Ah, okay.
I want, and that's one of the things where and I'll say, Kelvin, thank you very much for making that part of the dream possible. I can take him to school every day. I didn't have that before. But I want to be comfortable enough in my life where I can do whatever the fuck it is that I want and spend a lot of time with him and the family. That's really, that's a dream to me. If I can have those two things where I can do what I want, when I want, and spend every day that I can with him and help him to grow up to be like a man of character and the ultimate responsibility of a parent, I think, is to give your kids better than what you had. And if I think about it from an entrepreneur perspective, it's kind of the same thing. We give the people that work with us better than what we had, because that makes them better.
Yes, totally. Yeah.
That's what I want.
Well, how much of that dream is already reality?
Like I said, I've got part of it already, because I get to, I could take him to school. So I'm probably 1 or 2 exits away from getting me
to getting. That sounds long.
When the economy is the way that it has been for the past 2 years, there's always going to be a kickback, right? They're going to have to kick the day down the road a little bit.
All right. Ryan, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for telling your stories with a lot of transparencies, and I've learned so much in this conversation. And like you, I share some positive or optimism about the future of Vietnam and entrepreneurship in Vietnam and FinTech in Vietnam too. By the way, remember the dinner that I hosted? I accidentally, and I didn't even calculate it, invited so many FinTech people.
Sure.
Yeah. And I hope that your dream of spending all of the good time and being the best father for travel comes true every day.
I hope so too.